I'm Caroline Simpkins. I'm a former professional ballerina with a PhD in biomechanics, and today's episode is about a fascinating study called Ballet After Breast Cancer. Now, this isn't a study looking at elite dancers or even people with previous ballet experience. Instead, researchers wanted to understand how women who had been treated for breast cancer experienced participating in a 16-week ballet program. And what makes this study especially interesting is that it's qualitative. Instead of focusing on numbers like strength measurements or range of motion, the researchers asked participants a much deeper question. What was this experience actually like? And their answers tell a powerful story. So why was this study needed? Let's start with some background. The good news is that breast cancer survival rates continue to improve. Many women now live long, healthy lives after treatment. But surviving cancer doesn't necessarily mean life immediately returns to normal. Many women experience lingering effects from surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, or hormone therapy. These may include fatigue, pain, reduced shoulder mobility, decreased strength, reduced confidence, anxiety, changes in body image, and difficulty returning to activities they once loved. Exercise is one of the best supported interventions for improving health after cancer treatment. But what's the challenge? Less than 40% of women treated for breast cancer meet recommended physical activity guidelines. Researchers have increasingly become interested in dance because people often find it enjoyable, which may improve long-term participation compared to traditional exercise. Dance also combines physical movement with music, creativity, learning, and social interaction, offering benefits across multiple aspects of health. So you might wonder, why classical ballet? The researchers actually had a very thoughtful reason. Unlike many forms of exercise, ballet places a strong emphasis on port de bras, which is the coordinated movement of the arms. These movements require shoulder mobility, posture, muscular endurance, coordination, and body awareness. Those are particularly important because many women experience upper body limitations after breast cancer treatment. But ballet also offers something less tangible. It combines movement with music, artistry, expression, and mindfulness. It's not just rehabilitation, it's dancing. And that distinction turned out to matter a lot. This research paper followed up on an earlier pilot study that had already shown the ballet program was feasible. For this study, researchers invited participants to join focus groups after completing the ballet program. 17 women took part. They averaged about 54 years old and were roughly 4.5 years past their breast cancer diagnosis. The ballet program lasted 16 weeks, and participants attended 2 one-hour classes each week. Some attended in person before COVID restrictions moved classes online, while others completed the entire program virtually. The researchers analyzed the conversations and identified 5 major themes. Let's walk through each one. The first theme was embracing normal. This was perhaps the most moving finding. Many participants described cancer treatment as something that completely changed their relationship with their bodies. Several talked about losing confidence, feeling disconnected from themselves, and even questioning their identity. The ballet classes became a way to rediscover who they were, not by pretending cancer never happened, but by learning to live confidently in their new normal. One participant beautifully described finally being able to raise her arm after treatment, not just because of improved mobility, but because the movement itself felt expressive and alive again. Participants also described improvements in everyday activities. Things like tying their hair, fastening a bra, hanging laundry, walking uphill, and moving around the house with less pain. These aren't flashy outcomes, but they're incredibly meaningful. Perhaps my favorite finding from this section was that many women appreciated doing something that didn't feel like medical treatment. One participant explained that ballet was simply something normal that other people do. Another said she appreciated that the classes weren't constantly centered around cancer. Instead of feeling like patients, they simply felt like ballet students. The second major theme was connection. Participants consistently talked about feeling connected to others who shared similar experiences. There wasn't always a need to discuss cancer. There was simply an understanding. Everyone knew why they were there. That shared experience created accountability, encouragement, and belonging. The women who attended some in person classes particularly missed the conversations before and after class once everything moved online. Meanwhile, online only participants appreciated the convenience but felt it was harder to build meaningful relationships. Interestingly, another important connection was with the instructor. Participants repeatedly emphasized that the ballet teacher, who was the wonderful Dr. Rachel Ward, wasn't simply demonstrating exercises. She understood their limitations. She adapted the movements. She encouraged them. And she helped them feel emotionally supported as well as physically safe. Third, we have Theme 3, Acceptance Without Judgment. Anyone who's ever walked into a ballet studio as an adult probably understands this one. Many participants admitted they were nervous. They worried about being judged, especially after everything their bodies had already been through. But those fears quickly disappeared because every participant shared similar challenges. No one expected perfection. The culture became one of working within your own limits. Participants repeatedly praised the instructor's ability to adapt exercises to each person's individual abilities and recovery. Instead of comparing themselves to others, they simply focused on their own progress. The fourth theme looked at why the participants stayed engaged. One major reason? Ballet simply felt different. Several women admitted they disliked traditional exercise, but ballet didn't feel like exercise. It felt creative, it required concentration, music, learning, and expression. The participants also enjoyed learning French terminology, remembering choreography, and focusing on movement instead of thinking about working out. The researchers also found advantages and disadvantages of the online classes. Online classes definitely increased accessibility. There was no travel, and participants could join from home. And this became especially valuable during COVID. However, the in-person classes seemed better for concentration, motor learning, and building relationships. Many participants ultimately suggested that a hybrid model might combine the strengths of both. And the final theme focused on learning. Participants talked about learning ballet skills, but also learning about themselves. Because ballet is progressive by nature, with repeated exercises that gradually become more challenging, it created a safe environment for improvement. Several participants mentioned discovering they were capable of much more than they expected. One quote really stood out to me. A participant described realizing the value of trying something that initially felt frightening, working through that discomfort, and eventually seeing the benefits. That's a lesson that extends far beyond ballet. The participants also requested additional learning resources like recorded classes, ballet dictionaries, and instructional videos so they could continue practicing outside of class. So what can we learn from this study? One thing I appreciate about this paper is that the researchers didn't overstate their conclusions. This wasn't a randomized controlled trial proving ballet cures anything. It wasn't measuring cancer recurrence. It wasn't comparing ballet to other forms of exercise. Instead, it asked participants what mattered most to them. And their answers suggest that ballet may offer something uniquely valuable. Not just physical activity, but identity, confidence, creativity, community, and expression. Those are difficult things to measure with traditional research, but they're clearly important to quality of life. And another finding really caught my attention. The participants repeatedly emphasized that the instructor was essential to the program's success, not just because she understood ballet, but because she understood cancer recovery. The author suggests that future programs may benefit from training ballet teachers to better understand cancer-related limitations while preserving the artistic integrity of ballet itself. And I think that's an incredibly important point. Dance medicine isn't about making ballet less artistic. It's about making ballet more accessible while maintaining what makes it special. Of course, every study has limitations. This study included only 17 participants who volunteered for focus groups, so their experiences may not represent every breast cancer survivor. It was also qualitative, meaning the findings reflect personal experiences rather than objective measurements. Still, qualitative research plays an important role because it helps us understand why interventions matter, not just whether they change numbers. So I think one of the biggest takeaways from this paper is that recovery isn't only about restoring physical function. It's also about helping people reconnect with themselves. Sometimes that happens through strength training, sometimes through walking, sometimes through physical therapy, and sometimes through music, movement, and ballet. As dance medicine continues to grow, studies like this remind us that ballet isn't just performance. It can also be rehabilitation. It can be community. And for some people, it can be a meaningful step toward healing. Thank you again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Ballet Science podcast.